driving through the night trying to keep my eyes open. The generator's busted and the AC's broken. I'm talking to the Lord, hope he helps us get there safe. And we made it to the show, now we're singing to the crowd. We're playing encore and they're screaming real loud. Try to get home early, but I know that ain't the case. Yeah, it's another hotel room, sleeping on the floor. I'm hurting in the morning from the night before. Pay my dues, I'm eating, love the road. I'm coming home, baby, leave the porch light on. Breakfast in the morning from 7 to 9, but we just can't seem to wake up in time. We grab a cup of coffee and we're off to hit the road. Now we're running on fumes, no time to kill. We got one more show and it's a shitty doorbell. Breaking my back just to make a couple more. Yeah, it's another hotel room, sleeping on the floor. I'm hurting in the morning from the night before. Pay my dues, I'm eating, love the road. I'm coming home, baby, leave the porch light on. Yeah, it's another hotel room, sleeping on the floor. I'm hurting in the morning from the night before. Pay my dues, I'm eating, love the road. I'm coming home, baby, leave the porch light on. Yeah, it's another hotel room, sleeping on the floor. I'm hurting in the morning from the night before. Pay my dues, I'm eating, love the road. I'm coming home, baby, leave the porch light on.
Ladies and gentlemen, do you want to know why I'm here today? It's not because I want to give you a pep talk or because I want to make you feel good about yourselves. No, I'm here to tell you the truth.
Welcome, everyone. I hope you're doing well today as the day after the fog of the guilty plea by Bryan Kohberger in the Idaho 4 case. Hope you're doing well. I've had time to finally sleep after my big trip down to Boise to attend that trial. It was the first time I'd been in on something like that, so I got to get educated a lot about how that process works and how hard or easy it is to get into a courtroom and all those good things. Learned a lot. I feel like there's a sticker right underneath my freaking forehead in my hat. Anyways, gotta fix that later on. It's a newer hat that I bought. So yeah, I left a sticker on there and now it's driving me nuts. It's like a bug right in my face. Anyways, welcome. I'm going to try to spend a little bit more time looking at our comments today and bringing those up on the screen. We'll go a little bit slower, but I wanted to make an official statement, if you will, about my position about how do I feel? How do you feel, Devil's Advocates, now that Bryan Kohberger is guilty? So I'm going to answer that. I'm going to clarify what that means now that he's guilty. I'm going to clarify my position from the very beginning of this case versus now and how things have changed. I want to address some of those really horrible, horrendous things that people say to myself. And as I'm watching some of the responses from Harsh Reality and Jay Embry, I'm seeing that the people are treating them exactly the way they're treating me. So I thought I'd say something similar to what you probably have heard them say if you follow them, but I'm going to do it in my own way to address my haters and that whole clique out there who is wanting to really, really beat home how ashamed we should be of ourselves for ever having covered this case. So let's get into a few of those details now. And again, I want to thank you, by the way, for people who tuned into the thing. I don't know if you guys saw, I was streaming, if you will, on Discord. I didn't use Twitter, but I was basically doing a Twitter-like function. I was giving constant updates on my Discord channel and the Bryan Kohberger channel, everything that I was experiencing that night in real time, as much as I could get away with, considering that my phone battery, I had to kind of manage that and make sure I could get through the day and get it back on a charger, because I was dumb enough not to have brought a power brick. Well, I brought a power brick on the trip, but I didn't take it into the line because I thought it looked too much like a bomb, and I thought it would never get in through the security, and then they'd make me throw it away. And I just was like, fuck it, I'll just leave it. I'll just manage my battery. So that's what I did. But let me clarify a bunch of things about this case now that I've calmed down, I've had some sleep, and we can talk about it. Why the guilty quotes, somebody said. This is exactly what I wanted to, this is exactly why I want to address these things. So let's talk about that. So when I said it, now that he's guilty, so there's a difference. Let me just give you now I want to be right at the bat, because I know some of you are waiting for me to eat shit. I realize some of you just absolutely are waiting for me to eat shit. Let me clarify the difference between you are guilty and you submitted a guilty plea. But I will also clarify that submitting a guilty plea doesn't, it means something. It does mean something. I want to clarify that 100% in case you think I'm backpedaling. But there is a difference between he's guilty and he admitted guilt, or he submitted a guilty plea. If you do not understand that, you more than anyone need to stay here right now and hear this thing. Yes, Bryan Kohberger submitted a plea of guilty. That does not mean necessarily that he is guilty. Do I think that he is guilty of something? Absolutely. Do I think he was involved in the crimes? Absolutely. Do I believe that, as the judge made him say, I want you to tell me that you did this by yourself? I don't know that's the case. I have questions still. But yet I believe Bryan Kohberger was forced to admit to whatever they required him to say, including I did it by myself, even if he didn't, because that's the condition of the plea. If you want to submit a guilty plea, you must word it exactly the way they tell you to word it, and you must agree on all accounts, whether you really do or not. And you have to even agree to the, yes, I agree, and nobody told me I shouldn't agree. I have to agree to it, because the whole deal is off if you don't agree to everything the way it's stated. That's the way you get a plea deal only if you agree to exactly the way we write it up. You must agree to it exactly how we wrote it up, or there's no fucking deal. So you have to understand that a person can, I'm not saying in this case it did happen that way, so please pay attention. A person can admit guilt and not actually be guilty of the thing to do. And Jack's laughing in the thing, so Jack should probably now check out, because you are closed. Your mind is closed. Go fuck off and go find another channel. I'm sorry, I don't usually say that to somebody, but if you're gonna laugh at me, you can go find another content creator fucking yesterday. Go, get out of here. Now, I want to explain for those who still have an open mind in this country. Once again, let me state it clearly. I believe Bryan Kohberger was involved in that crime. May have even done it himself. That is 100% on the table. So I want to clarify a few things about what that means. Again, just an admission of guilt in a plea of guilty does not necessarily end the story. It certainly doesn't end the story here. Thank you, Kimberly, for taking care of that. That was getting under my nerves. And I don't like to do that. I kind of got personal with Jack, because I'm not going to sit here and have the guy fucking laughing at me, where it's a little raw with people's attitudes. And part of that is what this show is. I let that get to me. So let me apologize real quick. I really, really value myself and people having difference of opinion. I don't have a problem with you guys having difference of opinion, but don't get up here and laugh at me and mock me, especially when I'm trying to make a very, very difficult explanation to you of how I feel about things. So I wasn't ready to be mocked and laughed at while I'm on the camera. All right, so let me explain what it means about the not guilty thing. The fact of the matter is, it is a reality that for my channel, we have to be a little bit more careful about how we word things. Because at the end of the day, Bryan Kohberger admitted guilt. So my channel, and let me try to explain this as clearly as I can for those of you who can't get it through your skull. I believe in the presumption of innocence until proven guilty in a court of law. I gave Bryan Kohberger that presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And I questioned the official story with the assumption that Bryan Kohberger is presumed innocent. Things change when the defendant gets on the stand and says, absolutely, I did it. Unequivocally, I did it. Every single count that you bring against me, yes, I did that. Yes, I did that. And yes, I did that. Any logical person, which I view myself to be a logical person, any logical person has to say, well, how am I going to argue about that? I gave him the presumption of innocence. I gave him that presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And then he got up on stage, on camera, and he looked the judge in the eye and said, yeah, I killed those people. I went in there with malice aforethought, with intent to kill, and I killed those people. Now, we can sit there and say, oh, he was forced to do that all day long. The fact of the matter is that he could have done his fair day in court and made them prove his case. In fact, as I pointed out yesterday, when the judge made the prosecution explain to Bryan Kohberger what they would have had to have proven and what they would have attempted to prove. That case looked shoddy. In my opinion, when you hear what the prosecution was going to bring against Bryan Kohberger, he had a fair shot of winning that. He really did have a fair shot. If you listen to if you listen to both the way that the judge worded it, I want you to understand, he says to Bryan Kohberger, I want you to understand that by waiving your right, I want you to understand what the prosecution would have been forced to prove in court. That was hint number one, that Bryan Kohberger should pay attention. I want you to understand fully what they would have had to prove in order to execute you. Okay? Then he says, I want the prosecution now to tell you what would their case have been. There was shockers in Bill Thompson's case. There was no smoking gun. Nowhere did Bill Thompson said, we've got a picture of you and your face in your car sitting outside the house. In fact, Bill Thompson said, we can't definitively say that Bryan Kohberger was there. We just know his phone was in the area. He said that flat out. We can't prove Bryan Kohberger was there. We just know his phone was in the area, not even at the house. Bill Thompson did not come up with we have an eyewitness who saw you walk into the house. We have an eyewitness who saw you right outside the house. Bill Thompson did not list that as part of the prosecution's case. They did not have a Molly McMichaels willing to go on the stand and say, I saw him and saw his face there. I believe that the prosecution, that witness was compromised. They knew she wasn't going to stand up and they weren't going to put her on trial. And if it would have been, that the prosecution would have stated that to Bryan Kohberger. We have an eyewitness who saw you at the scene of the crime walking in, and we would have shown that in court. They could have even bluffed at that point. The prosecution could have even bluffed and just told them that they were going to do that because they don't have to prove it now. They're going to say, yeah, we were going to bring an eyewitness. They could say whatever they want. They're supposed to tell Bryan Kohberger what they had against him. And what they had against him was a circumstantial case still to this day. And yet, hear me now and listen to me later, as the old skit says in Saturday Night Live from back when I was fucking a youngster. And yet Bryan Kohberger still admitted guilt. Which says something, right? Which says something. At the end of the day, if Bryan Kohberger had no culpability whatsoever and he was 100% innocent, and they're reminding him that the prosecution doesn't have a strong case, it's all circumstantial, most people would roll the dice and be like, fucking prove it. I didn't do it. Prove it. I'll take my chances with the jury. But Bryan Kohberger allowed himself to say, even knowing your case is a little weak, yeah, I did it. So what do you want me to do about that? As Harsh Reality said in something I saw, you want me to apologize for presuming Bryan Kohberger's presumption of innocence until proven guilty? You want me to apologize for upholding the American legal standard that a man is innocent until proven guilty? You want me to apologize for that? Will not do it. And frankly, go fuck yourself if you think that that's what people should do, that we should not presume a person innocent. Again, let me back off. I need to stop dropping the F-bombs. It's a little rawer than I thought. The point being is that I have no apology to make for presuming Bryan Kohberger's innocence until proven guilty. But admittedly, when he was told that the case had a weak case, they didn't have an eyewitness, they didn't have all these things, and he still said, yeah, I did it. What do you think I'm supposed to do? Continue to ignore that Bryan Kohberger admitted to something in the face of a weak case? Now, there are a million unanswered questions. The one that bothers me the most, and I've said it a million times, the one that bothers me the most is that I believe that other people were involved and knew what happened that night and covered it up. It disgusts me that those people may never be held accountable, that we may never have to hear why Dylan acted the way she did, Bethany acted the way she did, why it took 8 hours for them to call 911, why the facts don't match up at all. We never have to explain that. And furthermore, some of you people out there will celebrate them as heroes and tell me that I need to apologize for them. Their questions suck ass. Their answers suck ass. Everything about their whole actions suck ass. They have some explaining to do. But guess what? People who want to just be the he's guilty, we walk away, though, they will never have to answer for themselves. They will never have to answer for that's a problem for me. That's a problem. But good for you. If you want to mock me and laugh in my face, they're never going to have to explain themselves to you devil's advocates because you're a retard. They have some fucking answers to answer for, but they never will because the case is over. So when I'm mad about the guilty verdict, don't get me wrong. I'm not mad because an innocent man went to jail. I'm mad because justice is not being served, in my opinion, because I believe there were others involved. I still believe there are others involved, and we will never get to know, because if they had the trial and if Ann Taylor had been permitted to actually show evidence of alternate perpetrators with motive and opportunity, this would be a completely different trial, a completely different discussion in America. So shit on me all you want for Bryan Kohberger admitted he's guilty. It's fucking over. You're right. In one hand, you are right. I will suck it up, Buttercup, and I will tell you, you are right. The trial is over. And for all of you who want to sleep better at night that the monster is in bed, good for you. But there are other monsters, I believe, potentially walking the street involved in this crime who get to now live their life for the rest of their lives being treated like they're some kind of fucking hero for getting away with murder. Because I don't believe at the end of the day that Bryan Kohberger did that alone. Maybe he did. Maybe he did. Because after all, he admitted that he did it by himself. But I have questions, and I'll bring up some of those questions before we end today. I'm trying to look at the comments because I told you I would spend more time talking about reading your comments. But I have lots to say still. All right, let's continue on. Nothing I think that we necessarily have to address at the moment. Unfortunately, I feel like some of you people, not you, I think most of you who are still here, and the 137 or so of you that are watching the channel right now, most of you would have tuned out at the very beginning when I told that other guy to go F himself for laughing at me. Most of you, if you were in that kind of camp, you were done. You heard everything you wanted to hear. Devil's Advocate still refuses to eat shit and tell us that we were all right. So if you're here right now, this isn't necessarily addressed to you, but I want people who might stumble upon this later to at least hear me out. Some of you in America really, really lack good listening skills. I, at times, am the same way. We as human beings tend to hear what we want to hear, or we hear what we think we're going to hear. I have been guilty many times in my life of feeling like I know what somebody's motivations are. And so even though they will tell me in point blank, word for word, that what I think they are thinking is wrong. No, I don't think this. And I'll be like, yeah, you really do. Because in my mind, I'm convinced that that's what they really feel. And even when they tell me it's not how they feel, I'll be like, I know better. You can tell me word, but I don't believe it because I know in my gut you're wrong. I've been guilty of that as well. So when I say that we all need to practice better listening skills, it's addressed to me as well. But let me make sure I'm clear about this. This entire time, when I have defended Bryan Kohberger's presumption of innocence, I have heard people accuse me, you just want a killer to walk free. You're sick. You want to glorify a mass murderer. Again, I'm going to avoid dropping the letter. I'm going to avoid dropping the word. So this is for you. You're not listening to me. I have repeatedly told you that I believe in the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And I have repeatedly told you, if Bryan Kohberger, let me say it again so you're fucking clear. If Bryan Kohberger is guilty of these crimes, he should pay. I said that from day one. I also said that there's a strong possibility Bryan Kohberger was involved, but he might have not gone into the house. He might have just been the getaway driver, but he was culpable and probably was involved. I've said that since day one. So anyone out there who says you just wanted a killer to go free, screw yourself. I never said that. I wasn't, my defending his presumption of innocence was for two reasons. One, because it was possible Bryan Kohberger was innocent. It was possible he was innocent. The state's case was circumstantial to the T. Even in the plea deal. Fuck, thank you for the super gift, by the way. Appreciate this so much. All right. Even if Bryan Kohberger, though, did it alone, there are so many questions in this case, and I will not apologize for asking them. But you guys who tuned out and checked out because all you heard was Bryan Kohberger might not be guilty and said, that motherfucker doesn't think Bryan killed. I got to quit dropping the F-bombs. Those of you who shit on me repeatedly and accused me of defending a killer, you are missing the entire point. I'm defending our constitutional rights. God forbid you are ever falsely accused of something, because if some MFer out there tells you you're guilty and everybody should just accept it because you've been accused, we're all screwed. Now, if, again, when Bryan Kohberger, in his own words, said, yes, I did it. Yes, no one's forcing me to say it. Yes, I acted alone. All of these questions. At that point, we have to change the dialogue a little. It does not. And this is where I want to make it clear today. It does not change fundamentally the questions that still remain. Why did Dylan act the way she did? Why did Bethany act the way she did? Did not other people have better motives and opportunities? We, in fact, to this day, have never been told a motive for Bryan Kohberger. We don't understand, and we never will. And some of you will repeat, and I will restate this the way I've said it a million times. You're right. We don't have to provide the motive. We don't have to prove motive. But there's a shit ton of people in America, even people who believe Bryan Kohberger is guilty, who wants to fucking understand why. Why? Why that house? Why those people? Why did you need to do that? What was going on? Why? Here's the problem. The alternative suspects that you weren't allowed to see have actual fucking motives, people. Actual motives that go beyond some kind of, he was just possessed by the need to kill. At the end of the day, that indeed may be the case. It may be the case that Bryan Kohberger just simply was a sociopath or a psychopath, depending on your nuance of that. And maybe he needed to kill. It may have happened that way. But I will guarantee you there are alternative suspects that actually had motives to kill. Actual reasons to kill the individuals, whether they were retaliating for people going to prison for drugs that were sentenced by testimony of parents involved in the house, whether it was a jealous ex-boyfriend who killed because his girlfriend or his lifelong love was leaving and he would never have her again. There are people with actual motives that play out in murder cases every day in America. Those motives didn't go away. Those people had motives. We have never heard a motive for Bryan Kohberger. And again, if you're not practicing good listening skills right now and all you're hearing is me trying to make justifications for Bryan Kohberger, I don't know how to say this more clearly. If Bryan Kohberger did it and he did admit to doing it, then there's not much I can do with that. But there are people out there who had motives that have been cleared and will be celebrated as heroes who may have actually been involved. And if it doesn't make you a little sick to think that maybe an actual perpetrator, a killer, worst case scenario, Kohberger took the plea deal. This is the worst case scenario. Kohberger took the plea deal because he didn't want to be executed. And he was willing to admit to something he didn't do in order to avoid being executed. That's worst case scenario. In which case, the real killer walks scot-free. The more likely scenario, in my opinion, is Bryan Kohberger was involved. There was others. And those people get to walk free because Bryan Kohberger took the fall for all of them. Not because of some noble deed, I'm sure, but because he was convinced that he had no right to, he had no option for a fair trial. So no, I want you to understand a few things that won't make me super, super popular. The statement by people who say, devil's advocates just wants a killer to go free. No, I've repeatedly told you that he could be involved, and if he was, that he should serve his time and he should be punished in whatever way is appropriate. I do not feel sorry for Bryan Kohberger getting his just due in prison if that's what he did, and he confessed to it. I don't have sorrow for a person getting what they deserve, but it doesn't answer a lot of questions. I want justice. Justice includes understanding and holding everyone accountable who was involved, not just Bryan Kohberger, because it was the easy answer. I want law enforcement held accountable. Law enforcement did some underhanded shit, bordering on illegal, may have actually done illegal things. I want, and will not get, an investigation into law enforcement. Not because I want a killer to be exonerated and go free. Not. These two things are independent of each other. At this point, law enforcement, in my opinion, law enforcement should be investigated for what they did. The prosecution should be investigated for potentially illegal tactics that they did and in their role in influencing the media and trying to shape public opinion. I believe law enforcement committed a crime by trying to leak things to the press and to the media, well, that's the same thing, and to the public to try to shape public opinion and win their case, which was circumstantial, and they were afraid they were going to lose. And they leaked things to the press. That is illegal. They should be held accountable. At some point, Hitler said, if we don't hold the people accountable who leaked information to Dateline NBC, then this is going to be a problem for the legal system forever to come. We need to find out who did it and held them accountable. How much do you want to bet we are done with that investigation now that there's a plea deal? How much do you want to bet that Hitler never holds anyone accountable? How much do you want to bet the investigation into who leaked information is over? That should piss you off. It won't for most people. Some of you here, those who watch my channel might be still pissed off, but a lot of people in America don't give a shit that the prosecution illegally or law enforcement illegally leaked information in the case to sway public opinion so that they could get a plea deal and they could get a guilty verdict because they had fucked him and he had no chance to a fair trial. And again, listen to me carefully. They fucked him doesn't mean that he wasn't guilty. It's just that he didn't have his chance to at least try to get off. If he had done it, he still had a chance to try to get off. They fucked him of that right. Because they illegally tainted the public. They leaked information to the media. They leaked, and it was either law enforcement or the prosecution. Hitler said so himself. Someone in law enforcement or the prosecution is leaking information to the press against the gag order. They prejudice the public. This may screw the entire trial, and I want to know who did it. I bet you we never get to hear those answers. I want that held accountable. I personally, and let me get this clear. I told you before, and some people busted my balls for it, that I would show Hitler respect. In his courtroom, I showed Hitler respect. When he came in, I was dead silent. When I was told to rise, I rose for the judge. When I was told to sit down, I sat down for the judge. Well, I kept my mouth shut the entire time the judge told everybody to keep their mouth shut. I was respectful to the office. Now that it's done, I want Hitler investigated. I want an investigation done into the prejudicial manner in which Hitler ran that court. Bryan Kohberger was not going to get a fair trial. Most people in America knew Bryan Kohberger was not going to get a fair trial. Hitler was biased pro-prosecution from the very beginning, and because he was pro-prosecution from the very beginning, the defense had no chance. I want Judge Hitler, Stephen Hitler, investigated properly. He doesn't have to be found guilty. I want him investigated by people that don't have a dog in the fight to see if Hitler was truly and fair and impartial. And if he wasn't, I don't want Hitler to serve on another fucking trial again, especially for a murder victim or suspect. That he should never preside over a case of this level again. If a jury of his peers or an investigation of his peers determined that he prejudiced that client and was pro-prosecution and did things that should have been allowed and forced the defense into a plea deal because they were never going to get a fair trial. That investigation should happen. And again, I feel like I have to tell you 12 times. When you hear me saying Hitler should be investigated on whether or not he was impartial or whether he railroaded the defense, it is not trying to get a killer off on something he did. It is not trying to celebrate the murders. You can screw yourself if you're still hearing that. Freaking get yourself an industrial fucking Q-tip and wipe your ears out. If Bryan Kohberger did it and he said he did, he should pay for that. So I'm okay with that. I'm not shedding a tear for Bryan Kohberger. I might actually still shed tears for the victims and the victims' families, especially with the thought that their children's other culpable people may be walking free and will never be held accountable. And if any of those family members know or have a really strong gut hunch that somebody got off for the murder of their child, I would weep for them literally and figuratively, because they will never get justice because this plea deal took everything away from them. No wonder Steve Gonsalves is fucking hot, in my opinion. Now, some people say, and they may be right and I may be wrong, that Steve Gonsalves' only protest over this thing by walking away from the court steps that day. I was told that he came with Christy and that he got to the steps and him and his son left. That's what I heard. He refused to go in and participate in this deal. And some take that as to say that Steve Gonsalves simply wanted Kohberger to be executed, and that was the only thing that would satisfy Gonsalves. And that may, in fact, be the case. But I honestly think it's more than that. I think Steve Gonsalves to this day still believes that others were involved. And by having a trial, those others may have come out. And now they never will. We will never have the answers about what really happened. I feel, but I don't know the man, that Steve Gonsalves is more furious about the fact that we will never know what really happened because the shit-ass plea deal robbed us of everything. It robbed us of understanding what happened. It robbed us of getting to the bottom of what the real motive was. And worse yet, it robbed us of the possibility that people who were involved and helped out with a murder walked. And we can never prove that. And I want to make another statement about Steve Gonsalves. I have said over and over again, I hope that if you question me, you'll take the decent, if you question me, I hope you have the decency to go back and watch my videos. I've repeatedly told you that I sympathize with Steve Gonsalves. I have said before, I wished he would shut his mouth. Why? Because I want justice for his daughter. I want justice for the victims. And by him opening his mouth, he is prejudicing this trial. He is potentially ruining the trial. Shut the hell up and let it take its course. Yes, protest. Yes, but, and here at the end of the day, let me say this. Steve, if you didn't shut your mouth, it's okay. I get it. I'm feeling emotional at the moment because, again, my complaint with Steve was more about justice. So those of you, I saw Harsh Reality getting attacked. I saw Pavarotti getting attacked. Everybody's getting attacked. And I want to address another thing. Those people who say, oh, they're mocking. Oh, Harsh Reality, Pavarotti, Devil's Advocate, Birdie Bombshells, Nika Neuro Nuggets, Murder Metal Mayhem. All of you guys are just sad because you're going to have to go get a real job. Oh, your paycheck is over. I was going to drop a massive F-bomb right now. I will hold that anger. Go screw yourselves. You are so disrespectful, it's not even funny. One, none of those people I mentioned, in my opinion, were out to make money off of Bryan Kohberger. You can go take a long walk off of a short pier. If you really think that we content creators who were doing things like defending the civil liberties and the rights of the accused, and presuming the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. If you really believe we did that to make money, screw yourself. And stay the fuck away from my channel. We don't need that kind of shit here. And how disrespectful are you that you think that Harsh and Pav and Birdie and myself and Pete from Murder Metal Mayhem and all these people, that you don't understand that the reason our channels do well is not because we're making money off of a mass murder. It's because we resonate with human beings. Obviously not you, but we resonate with human beings. People appreciate our passion, our convictions, our thought process, and our brain. We didn't suddenly get stupid because Bryan Kohberger confessed to a crime. We didn't just suddenly become dipshits and like, oh, now I got nothing to talk about. Are you fucking crazy? How disrespectful are you that you think the entire reason why our channels exist is because we are making money off of a tragedy of Bryan Kohberger, and now we have nothing else to do because we're shit ass human beings that nobody would have listened to if we weren't cashing in on some cash cow tragedy. Screw you. You are so disrespectful to every single one of those channels. Those individuals will continue on, and if they don't, it's their choice, but it's not because they suddenly can't make money off of a crime. They're all smart fucking people. They will go on if they want to because other human beings resonate with them. Because they're bright people and they're compassionate and they care and they want the truth. Some of you don't want the truth. Some of you want to go to bed at night feeling like, oh, I feel so much better. Ha ha ha, I was right. I was right all along. Everything that I believed in the first 15 seconds of hearing the case, it turned out to be true. Don't be ignorant. Try to wake up a little bit. Try to think outside of the box of your little world where everybody tells you how to think. The people who watch these channels watch us because we don't think like the sheeple. We don't sit there and believe the simple answers. We ask good questions. In fact, if they weren't good questions, we wouldn't have a channel. All right. So let me make a few clarifications and then we'll get to questions and answers for the last 20 minutes or so. I still have questions in this case. I'm going to reiterate some of the questions. Was Brent Kopacka involved? Why did officers shoot and kill Brent Kopacka? And why does it look like law enforcement covered up what happened to Brent Kopacka? Why was his phone wiped? Why did Steve Gonzalez mention the name Brent Kopacka? Why does Brent Kopacka's name come up several times during the investigation? Why is Kopacka's name anywhere near this case if there was never any questions about Brent Kopacka? I still have questions unanswered about Brent Kopacka. What about the jealous ex-boyfriend? I still have questions about him and Jack Showalter and all the individuals. Why did Jack Showalter tell Maddie, they're going to get you for this? What happened that night at the grub truck? What was the threat? Why were the girls panicked? Who were they texting? If they had no idea about Bryan Kohberger, the killer on the way, because he just randomly decided to go kill 4 girls, or 3 girls and a boy, sorry. I keep making that stupid mistake. Ethan Chapin, in a way, I owe an apology to the families of Ethan Chapin for constantly listing it as the girls were just killed. That is a bad of my part that I need to get over my mistake. I always lump this into the girls were killed. There was a young man killed as well. I have questions about what happened at the grub truck. I have questions about what happened at the corner club. I have questions, of course, most of all, about Dylan and Bethany. What was the exculpatory information that Bethany Funk was hiding and didn't want desperately to come back and talk about on the stand? I believe Bethany Funk saw something that night or knew something that would destroy the case, and she was not going to come back in court. She was going to, over her fucking bad choice of words. She was not going to come. She was going to fight it all the way. She did not want to be subpoenaed and have to come back to court and testify about what she saw, because what she saw would have destroyed the case, in my opinion. I've got questions that'll never be answered about Dylan and Bethany. And most of America will have questions for decades about what happened with Dylan and Bethany. At the end of the day, though, we're going to repeatedly, people like me, get kicked in the mouth and told how shitty of a human being we are for questioning and victim shaming poor little Dylan and Bethany. And maybe there is a simple answer. But I have questions. But at some point, we're going to have to stop asking the questions. Why? Because we're getting into a difficult area. I am allowed, let me remind you of a couple things before I get to the questions at the end. I am allowed, even after Bryan Kohberger has admitted guilt, I'm allowed to still question the story by my constitutional rights and First Amendment rights of free speech. I'm allowed to question it. But you get into a gray area when somebody has confessed to the crime, and then you say, well, what if he didn't do it? What if so-and-so did it? Some could try to use that. And in America, there's a statement that's true. In America, you can sue anybody for anything you want. So can I be sued by asking questions after a person has already confessed? Absolutely. I could be sued. It's fucking America. You can sue somebody for anything you want. Can I defend myself against it? Probably yes. Because I'm careful about how I word things. I'm very careful about how I word things. I will tell you flat out when what I'm saying is just an opinion. I will tell you flat out when I just have questions. And it's not an accusation, it's a question. Because I'm smart enough, and so are all the content creators I listed before, that you're like, boo-hoo-hoo, all your guys' channel are over. No, we're smart enough to know how to ask questions in a way that is legally allowed in America. If you want to shut down that free speech, again, there's a short pier I'd like you to take a long walk on. I'll help you out with it. Metaphorically, I'm not threatening to kill somebody, for fuck's sake. Anyways, sorry there's more F-bombs tonight than normal, or today than normal. And so as I will wrap up the last thing about what my channel is and what happens going forward now that Bryan Kohberger has admitted guilt. And then I will focus on your questions and comments a lot more for the last 20 minutes. My whole shtick on my channel is taking high-profile cases and using it to demonstrate the presumption of innocence until proven guilty in a court of law and upholding our right to a fair trial, to be critical of media and how they handle a case and how they often try to sway public opinion and convince America how to feel about a victim before they even have their first day of trial. I'm critical of law enforcement, and any time that law enforcement oversteps their bounds and does illegal things to get a conviction because they personally have decided already before the trial begins who's guilty and will take steps to make sure that person goes down for it. I will be critical of that every single time. And I also am critical about the judicial system and showing how our court systems can be abused by a bad judge, a bad prosecution, a corrupt legal system to force convictions and plea deals potentially out of people for things because they have no choice. They will not get a fair trial. And I will always be able to find in America, unfortunately, I will always be able to find a high-profile case that allows me to do what I do, which is to use high-profile cases to educate the public on how our legal system, our media, and our law enforcement system works. I enjoy showing people how court process works, how due process works, and when due process is being violated, what was legal and what wasn't legal. We can all learn in America from having a deep dive of the court case, regardless of how it ends up, regardless if the person at the end of the day is guilty or not. Hopefully, I find that if you watch this channel, I hope that somebody out there can give me an amen or something in the comments, that if you watch this channel, regardless of how you felt about the case in the beginning, that you learned something about the judicial system that from me or from my covering of the thing, that you learned something about the process. If you learned anything, that's what I'm here for. That's what I do. This is what I enjoy. It's what my passion is. At the end of the day, the cases that I follow are a vehicle for educating the masses and for having the bigger conversation and making us all better at being critical thinkers. That's what I want to do. Thank you for the amen. So, unfortunately for those, and you didn't stay around for it, those that hate my channel, I'm not going anywhere. My channel's not going anywhere. Bryan Kohberger was a hot topic for sure. So will things slow down for a while? Sure. But in America, there's always one more case around the horizon where law enforcement is breaking the law to convict somebody, where the media is spreading lies to shape public opinion. That will never end in America. I will never be out of content. All right. Let's start reading some questions and comments. Mommy Karen says, you're amazing. Don't let any of the haters make you think any differently. Thank you. Thank you so much. I do really, really, really appreciate the people who have come to my side, especially in the last couple of days. I'm getting my ass kicked by people in comments about how I should feel so ashamed of myself. Let me say this, though. About 4 months ago, when I started this journey, I took a lot of comments personally. I take a lot less comments personally than I used to. Even despite the fact that I told somebody to F off at the beginning of this thing, I really do take things a lot less personally. I have learned that there is a lot of shitty people out there, a lot of shitty people. And at some point I realized it's not personal. Shitty people are just shitty people. And in fact, they're not just shitty to me. That's why it's not personal. That's why it's not personal, people. This is what I learned. These people aren't just shitty to me. If it was just shitty to me, I might take it personally. Shitty people are shitty people. And it's not, and they're shitty to other people too. So why am I upset about people being shitty human beings? That's on them. That's not on me. So I used to take it personal. I'm like, why are you coming after me? You're not coming after me. You're a shitty human being and you go after everybody that doesn't think like you. And I don't have time for shitty human beings. So I've gotten a thicker skin. Thank you very much. And those of you who stood by me and helped me and say, hey, devil's advocates, don't listen to the trolls. Trolls be trolls. That's what they do. I've now realized you're 100% correct. It's what they do. They're going to be shitty to everyone. Renee says, Lee, believe it or not, you have more fans, followers than haters. Look how much your channel has grown. They are jealous and maybe afraid of all the potential your channel has. Thank you so much. You're right. I do think at the end of the day, and I don't want to sound gloaty, but at the end of the day, the metrics speak for itself. My channel's got growth. It's not dying. And you know what? When Kohberger's trial ended in the guilty plea, it's not like people are unsubscribing from my channel, at least not faster than they're subscribing to the channel. In fact, I have a paid membership tier, and I had 9 new people subscribe to my membership tier after the guilty verdict, rather than leaving me. So thank you very much. I do think that at the end of the day, more people are interested in those stories than not. Dashing Fun says, how did Molly see him if he parked out back? Here's the thing, Dashing. I mean, here's the thing. Bill Thompson didn't list that Molly even saw him that night. When Bill Thompson went through the list of what they were going to present in court, you know what he didn't say? We've got an eyewitness that saw you at the house. In fact, what he did say was, we can't definitively say you were at the house. We can definitively say that your phone was near the house, but we can't definitively say the closest thing that Bill Thompson came to saying they can prove that he was in the house was that there was DNA left, a single source DNA. But even then, Bill Thompson is not saying we have proof you were in the house. We have proof that your DNA was in the house. Fortunately, people like Jennifer Pell is still out there. This case is too strange to be all the facts. We do not have all the facts. Jennifer, you're right on. We do not have all the facts. At the end of the day, Bryan Kohberger has confessed to guilt, and that is it for Bryan Kohberger. But the facts are still weighing on our minds, isn't it? And if we can uncover some of those facts, we will continue to be interested in those facts, whether or not he sits in jail for the rest of his life or not. Scott wants to reemphasize this statement on the stand. Are you pleading guilty, Bryan Kohberger, because you are guilty? And his answer was yes. Once again, it's hard to argue with that, Scott. It's really hard. And if it makes you feel fantastic, that's great. It's hard to argue with it. That's why it's written that way. Are you saying you're guilty because you are guilty? Yes. You have to say that. There's no plea deal. In fact, there was a moment, I'm going to go on a slight side tangent. There was a moment where they asked, where the judge wanted to hear Ann Taylor say, do you admit that you had plenty of time to review the discovery? Ann Taylor halted and hesitated, even made a little bit of an eye roll and a how do I, but at the end of the day, she must say yes, whether she believes it or not, or the plea deal's off the table. Every single question must, without reservation, be answered in the affirmative, or the plea deal is off. So whether she felt it, that it was true or not, she had to make a decision before walking in the court that she was going to say yes to it. Whether she felt it was true or not, she has to, or the plea deal is off. I'm just looking for questions real quick as we finish out the day. Let me address something. Angel, I'm not doing this to attack you. So please understand, I'm not doing this to attack you. I'm going to use this as an example. Anne was touching and laughing with him. She shouldn't do that if he killed 4 people. There is more to this than you know. And I know that what you're saying is maybe it means Anne didn't believe that he killed people. That's why she's laughing. But let me say one thing about this. And it's, again, not an attack to you. You just helped me bring up a point. People act really, really strange in uncomfortable situations. EMTs, for example, who go out to crime scenes where something horrific happened and children have been killed in a car accident, will make a joke if there's a pun or a joke to be made at the scene of the crime. I know for a fact, for example, when I wanted to serve as a citizen on a police ride around and take a law enforcement class on how a law enforcement works and operates, I was asked the question, are you going to be able to handle hearing things that you consider inappropriate in a police station, such as officers making light of people's victims' injuries, making light of making jokes about things, because that is how people relieve stress. Sometimes, yes, it is really, really ugly. But when people are under stress, sometimes humor, even in the darkest moments, is the only way you deal with the stress. And you can beat the piss out of people for making an inappropriate joke or laugh or whatever as admission of guilt. When in reality, sometimes things are so stressful that humor is the only way for us to relieve that stress. So where I'm going with that is when Ann Taylor smiles or laughs, it's a stressful moment. Anything to take the pressure off that moment. As a kindness, a smile, a touch, to take some of the stress off of what is a super somber moment, could be misconstrued as proud of a killer, when might be just simply the actions of somebody under an extreme amount of stress. And people act inappropriately when they're under extreme amounts of stress. And yes, Ann Taylor may have been soothing BK because she doesn't think he's guilty. That is very much a possibility. I'm just careful about saying it. It's very much a possibility. In fact, one of the things I've stated from the beginning of the guilty plea was something to this effect. And I didn't hit it super hard, so I'll hit it one more time briefly. When he accepted the guilty plea, they have to enumerate the facts as they exist today. Now that those facts have been established, if somebody comes along and proves that the facts that were established were not accurate, that changes everything. And I gave one example, I'll give again. Cy Ray, the expert, the literal expert who wrote the software and trained law enforcement, including the FBI, on how to analyze advanced timing records, appeared to be, for the first time in his entire career, willing to go on the stand on the behalf of Bryan Kohberger to say Bryan Kohberger wasn't at the crime scene, like they say, and that they know he wasn't there, and they manipulated the data for the cell tower timing advance records to suggest to the jury that he was there when they knew he wasn't. If, after the guilty plea, somebody comes forward and can prove that the facts that the state said, that we can prove Bryan Kohberger was in and around that house at that time and went into the house at exactly 4:07 and left the house at 4:20, that he did those things at that exact moment. And then somebody can come along, even after a guilty plea, and say, by the way, that's impossible because Bryan Kohberger's on camera at 4:20 a.m. In another state, or whatever the hypothetical can be. If somebody comes forward with new evidence that says it is impossible for Bryan Kohberger to been where you said he was at the time, that changes even the plea deal, even the guilty verdict, because new facts will come out saying it was impossible for him to have done it. Hello, Jeremy Pearson, super follower, he's Jeremy Pearson. You have been so supportive. When I see your name, a smile comes to my face. You've been mostly 100% in my camp. I think I owe you that shout out. Thank you so much. Looking for comments on the way out here. There is Becky, Becky, whatever. I don't know how you say it. Becky, there is a lot of questions about the money and the funding and the damage that the universities would have suffered by not getting a guilty verdict. And again, I'm not saying by that Bryan Kohberger isn't guilty, but I think that there was motivation in this case to get to a swift verdict and get this thing off the table, because there is a lot riding financially of not having a verdict. And so if pressure can be made to get a verdict or to get a confession and end this thing, so be. Down the rabbit hole to hell says, Hitler is known for asking the perp, so give me evidence that makes you be there, like something that's not in the public. Tell us something to prove you did it. I don't know Hitler's track record with that. That's super interesting. Hitler has always looked to me to be pro-prosecution. Having said that, several things that Hitler did that last day at the trial made me look at Hitler a little differently. And that was his stating, I need you to understand what the state would have been forced to prove. I need you to hear what they had on you. I need you to understand you could have received a lesser sentence. I need you to understand. And yes, some of that is just required legal language, but it felt like Hitler was allowing him that last chance to say, and I could be completely wrong, but it felt a little bit like, I'm giving you the last chance to say that you don't have to take the plea deal. That if you really, really are innocent, but that's contrary to everything we saw before, which was he wasn't going to allow a solid defense to be presented. And maybe at the end of the day, that could be the ulterior motive. Maybe Hitler wanted to have a trial and for him to be convicted in a court where everyone saw it, so that we wouldn't have people sitting around going, oh, he just accepted a plea deal to get out of the trial because he would have been exonerated. And maybe he wanted to cut that off at the pass by having the trial. Let's go forward to the trial and actually convict you with the court of your peers so that we'll never have to question this. Is there a mental illness that can contribute to this case guilty? No, I don't. Alien Dog, I don't believe so. It's part of the reason why Hitler stated some of the questions that he did at the very beginning. Did you take any intoxicants or any substances that might impair your decision today? No. Do you believe you're thinking clearly? Yes. Because those questions are to make sure that there's no statement later on, well, you know, I took some Xanax before the trial or I took something that altered my, whatever. He wanted to make sure, at least in his wording, that there was nothing altering his opinion and that he felt he was thinking clearly when he made the decision. Those are part of the steps they take. There's not going to really be any room for any potential insanity, not thinking clearly point, because that was stated and agreed to. Collector's Digest. I would rather 100% guilty go free than one innocent person to have their liberty stripped. Everyone presumed innocent. A lot of people quick to convict BK, yet outrageous over KR. Cherry-picking hypocrites. Well said. Well said. That is one thing that I believe our judicial system was framed upon, which is that we would rather a few, and I'll word it differently, a few guilty people go free than for one innocent person to go to jail for something that they didn't do. So much of your life is lost and you're demonized, and you'll never get that time and your reputation back if you're falsely accused and go to jail for something you didn't do. That is the biggest injustice. All right, continuing to look at the last minute questions. Carrie asks, do you think autism or Asperger BK at some point could retract the plea deal if a doctor stepped in? No, I don't believe that's the case, but that's my personal opinion. No. I do not believe that will factor in whatever in that, but that's my, and I could go into the long-winded explanation, but the simple question, my answer is simply no. I don't believe that is going to factor into a guilty plea. It might have factored into the punishment phase when they were deciding what he should get for his punishment, but it won't probably factor in at all to the guilty plea, in my opinion. Thanks for the question. All right. It is about 1 hour in. That's when I tend to wrap things up. It's funny. I'm going to make an apology while saying that I'm going to stop apologizing. That's hilarious. I do apologize at the number of F-bombs I dropped. However, as I watch other content creators not apologize every single time they drop an F-bomb, I'm just deciding I'm apologizing too often for F-bombs. So I'm going to lighten up a little bit on apologizing every freaking time I say the F-bomb. I will say that at times, I don't personally pride myself on dropping too many F-bombs, because I realize that some people do want to hear the intelligence behind my argument, but they don't want the cursing. And I understand that. And I feel like I can present my argument without cursing as much. And I do realize that some of you actually do appreciate the cursing because it shows the passion. So where I'm going with all of that is, I apologize that I had a lot more than I expected today, but I'm also not going to apologize every time I say it anymore. I'm just going to let me be me. But at the, as a last minute word, I will try to do it more carefully and not have it be half my show. Thank you all for coming today. I hope that you will, if you haven't, you'll consider giving me a like, subscribe, and a follow, even though you're thinking, what is there to follow anymore? The trial's over. I cover other cases. I cover Luigi Mangione and the United Healthcare situation, which is a bigger conversation in America about healthcare and our American legal system, or our American system. Our healthcare system is corrupt, and whether or not what got to the point that somebody might find that that is a reasonable way to deal with the healthcare system. That's a big conversation, a big topic. Lots to sink into. Gilgo Beach murders, Rex Heuermann. I'm covering that. I've got several other cases that are catching my attention. Tyree Nichols is one of them. Other cases are catching my attention. Let's not forget the Bryan Kohberger thing is not over. There's questions about the firefighters recently that were shot in a lured-in situation. There's questions about people who have been exonerated that may have not been completely looked into. There may be investigators that are going to continue looking into the alternative suspects that Ann Taylor wasn't allowed to show in court. Bryan Kohberger may not be over. All of this may not be over. Thank you so much for watching my channel. It was great to see you. I go live again tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, followed by the After Dark show. What is the After Dark show? That's adults only on Discord. We have a few drinks. We drop F-bombs without apology. We talk about Diddy and oh yeah, Diddy's verdict was read while I was in line for Kohberger. Did you know that happened? That verdict was announced. The verdict was announced while I was in line in the courthouse. It was a buzz all up and down the line inside the courthouse. What was Diddy's verdict? What was written? We were all talking about it. It was a big thing inside the courtroom. There's another little thing that you missed from my experience at the courthouse. Anyways, thank you so much. Love everybody. Considering subscribing, consider becoming a member of the channel. If you like deeper dives and behind the scenes stuff and early sneak peeks, it's super cheap, $2.99. You can get backstage access, lots of content there. I got a million things going on. I won't even bother you with all the things I got going on. Check it out if you haven't done so already. Have a good day. See you tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.